The reading today will be from Matthew 15, chapter 21 through 28, the Message. From there, Jesus took a trip to Tyre and Sidon. They had hardly arrived when a Canaanite woman came down from the hills and pleaded, "Mercy, Master, Son of David, my daughter is cruelly afflicted by an evil spirit." Jesus ignored her. The disciples came and complained, "Now she's bothering us. Would you please take care of her? She's driving us crazy." Jesus refused, telling them, "I've got my hands full dealing with the lost sheep of Israel." Then the woman came back to Jesus, knelt down and begged, "Master, help me." Jesus said, "It's not right to take bread out of children's mouth and throw it to dogs." She said, "You're right, Master, but even beggar dogs get scraps from the Master's table." Jesus gave in. "O woman, great is your faith. Let it be done as you wish." Right then her daughter became well. What do you make of this story? God be with us as we look at your scripture.
I don't know about this story. Well, the first thing that we know is that Jesus had left Jewish territory, and he goes to this place, this Tyre and Sidon place. And this woman who meets him is a Canaanite woman. So we think that maybe Jesus is leaving to get some rest. Right? He's going somewhere else, somewhere away from Galilee, away from the Judeans to get some rest. And this woman who's a Canaanite, what do we know about Canaan? The Canaanites are, actually the king of Sidon was the father of Jezebel. Okay, so these are the folks who those early Israelites were at war with, right? She comes to him and asks for healing, and Jesus, what a friend we have in Jesus, ignores her. But that's what it says. Okay? All right. And then the disciples, the followers of Jesus who will become God's church on earth, they say, "She is driving us nuts." There's the wellspring of compassion right there, right? Send her away. And Jesus says, "Look, I have just come for the lost sheep of Israel." Okay? So it's basically like she's not my problem. I guess, to be charitable, this passage can remind us that Jesus is both God and human. Right? Yeah. Okay? He's human, he's tired, he's like, "I'm tired of healing, I'm kind of done. Look, I didn't come for you and your people. I came over here to get some rest. This is not my problem." So we remember that in that incarnation, that's that big fancy theology word, what that means is that God with us is God in our humanness. God, messy, complex, tired, evidently rude. Because then when the woman is so desperate, her daughter has an evil spirit, right? She is desperate. She gets down on her knees and begs. Then what does Jesus say? "It's not okay for me to give the food for children, the lost sheep of Israel, to dogs." The scholars say, well, he didn't really mean like a vicious dog. Like, the word in the Greek is kind of like a pet dog, like a cocker spaniel, or that does not make me feel any better. He's basically refusing to help her based on who she is. Why is this? Are there parts of the Bible where you just read it and you go, why is this in here? This is not my friend in Jesus. This is not who I want to know is welcoming. But that Canaanite woman, she doesn't get offended. I would be offended. I would be like, "Oh, okay, fine. I'm a dog. All right, I'm done." But it's her daughter. Man, she is desperate. So she's like, "Okay, I'm not even going to argue with that. I'm just going to say, well, yeah, okay, I hear that, but even dogs deserve to eat." And Jesus changes. Let's think about that. We say in our church that God is still speaking. And what we mean is that God still has revelation. There's still more wisdom, there's still more love, there's still more transformative presence to come out of our Christian faith. God's not done yet. This woman who is so desperate and so persistent, who will not go away, I don't know, maybe she's been there like an hour and a half, I don't know, a long time, changes Jesus' ministry. Why is this passage in the scripture? I think it's to remind us that Jesus, even Jesus, needed reminding that he came for all people. Not just some people, not just the chosen people, not just his disciples, but people who occupied land before his people got there. People who were desperate. Jesus remembers and he says, okay, great is your faith, and heals the woman's daughter. And this is just one of the many times in the scripture where we see that Jesus is called not just to the Jewish people, but to the Gentiles. And the church is called not just to one people, but to everybody. When we say God is still speaking, I think of that verse in Isaiah about God, I'm about to do a new thing. And I think maybe sometimes it's our needs, it's our desperation that bring out that new thing in God. Isn't it amazing to think that God's not done? That like there's more, somehow something about us here now and our needs and our desperation is going to mean that God's going to do something new that's never happened before. And unexpectedly. I mean, Jesus was not expecting somebody with lots of faith to come and bother him, and yet she did. And so I think lots of times do we. I wonder this morning, what are we desperate for? What are we so desperate for that even when the church hurts us and wounds us and lets us down, even when God doesn't answer, because we know that happens, right? I mean, let's be real, that happens. We still come back because we are so desperate. And we say, but God, that covenant that we sang about, you promised we could lean on you. So show up. And that's exactly how I feel this morning. I feel like I am desperate to see more of God. I am desperate for healing. I am desperate for justice. For my daughter and the generations that will come after her. And I am not content with the God I got, the one I grew up with. I'm not content with the church as it is now. I feel like there's still more that God is going to do. Amen. I think that justice is possible, that peace is happening, that love wins, and I am not done with God. I am not done with the church, because God is real, and God is going to do a new thing. Amen. Amen. Oh, this story teaches us that, I think, that we have to call God out. We call God and Jesus and say, remember that you were sent for all of us. That you came for everybody. I am not done with God yet. I am not done with our church yet. And I hope that you aren't done either. I was reminded of our still speaking God when I attended General Synod this morning, 2 weeks ago. This morning, I just remember 2 weeks ago. So 2 weeks ago, Sharon Mackie and I went to Cleveland, Ohio, and the theme of General Synod was unexpected places, which I thought was perfect because, Cleveland. I mean, no disrespect, but not really the first place I would think of to meet God. And yet there, where our national offices are, we did meet God. We encountered God. And so I've asked Sharon to come and share some of her reflections about this national gathering. I want to just say one quick other thing. General Synod is every 2 years the national gathering of all of the United Church of Christ. Now, our church is very congregational, which means that the work the national church does is important for us as Christians because we speak out in an ecumenical national setting. But it's also not prescriptive. We still get to do what we want. So you'll see images in the PowerPoint this morning that we took, Sharon and I, at Synod, and then Sharon will share about her experience there. And I encourage us to think about it as an offering of how God is still speaking in unexpected ways and moving in us. So Sharon, would you like to go?
Well, my choice to go to General Synod was all prompted by us making the sterling comma for the confirmation class in April. I was talking with Pastor Don regarding having them available to other UCC churches, and before you know it, I was talking to Marie Tyson, who was the head of sales and distribution for the UCC resources at headquarters in Cleveland. I felt this urge to go there, meet her, and be a fly on the wall at the General Synod meetings. So I made my reservations, and I happened to be staying just one block from headquarters. That was by no, I did not make that plan. And also I was very close to the convention center, so I did a lot of walking. With no planning on my part, it was all serendipitous. I forgot this. So, let me see, I left Thursday night, arrived in Cleveland at 6:30 their time. So at 3:30 in the morning to my brain, it was bright and sunny outside. But I knew I needed to make my way to the conventions or to my place, and hopefully they'd give me a room. So they did. Once I took a nap, got refreshed, I went and picked up my bag. Everybody got a red bag, so we're all walking around with that. And you also had to have your blue lanyard. Mine got a special blue ribbon because it said this was my first General Synod. So it had my name on it. It didn't say where I was from, but we all wore these, and we were all walking around Cleveland with them. So you know who was friendly to talk to. And then the big book of stuff that I had no clue. But I studied it. Once I received my package, I saw on there on the agenda several times, and by Marie's prompting from the UCC headquarters, she goes, you gotta see the Amistad Chapel, which is located at headquarters. I kept missing the tour because the tour was at 1, but they didn't tell us that the bus left at 12:30. But it was only like 5 blocks away. I didn't understand this, but anyway, I kept missing the tour. But on Sunday, I decided to walk over to the chapel from my hotel, since they were giving a scheduled tour then, and then worship was going to be after. They had already started with the tour in the chapel, which I was late for. Apparently the bus that was taking folks to the chapel was leaving a half an hour early for the location only 5 blocks away. So the folks at headquarters kept starting the tours early because the people were there. They had a wonderful video that explained how the chapel received its name, Amistad Chapel. The chapel celebrates the Amistad story and this historic fight for justice, a fight that is rooted in the history of the United Church of Christ. It was named after the ship Les Amistad, when in 1839, hundreds of native Africans were captured from Maniland near Sierra Leone and sold into the Spanish slave trade. They were brutally transported and endured sickness and death on their journey. They were taken to a Spanish colony in Havana, Cuba, where they were fraudulently classified as native Cubans, where they were sold to plantation owners and put on board the cargo schooner La Amistad, whose meaning translates to friendship. Desperate, the Africans staged a revolt 3 days into the journey and seized control of the vessel, planning to sail back to Africa. During the night, the crew secretly set the sails back to Cuba, disobeying the mutiny. After several months at sea, the ship arrived at Montauk Point, Long Island, New York, where the ship and its African cargo were seized. On August 29, 1839, the Olmsted was towed to New London, Connecticut, where the Africans' legal struggle for freedom was waged in a lengthy court battle. Charged with murder and piracy and claimed as salvaged property along with the Olmsted, the Africans were imprisoned in New Haven, Connecticut. Members of the American Missionary Society, along with former U.S. President John Adams and abolitionist Lewis Tappan, organized a legal defense and began to provide for the Africans' physical well-being and educational instruction. They located a translator who could speak M.Div and thus allow the captives to tell their own story. The case traveled to the Supreme Court, where the leader of the captive Africans shouted, "Give us free, give us free," over and over, using the English he learned. In March of 1841, the Supreme Court issued its final verdict. The Olmsted Africans were free people and allowed to return home. So therefore, the chapel is named after that. And it did remain a chapel, and it's gotten revised, remodeled, but recently has become a congregation. This space at Olmsted Chapel has a lot of symbolism in its architecture. I don't have a picture of the font, but there's a font at the beginning, in the entryway, that's a reminder of the Christian rite of baptism and provides a continuous sound of falling water, perhaps a reminder of the journey at sea of the Olmsted captives. The art glass ceiling that you'll see up there is suspended and adorned with lights to mimic the stars over the ocean. The oval-shaped